Our first presentation is brought to you by Carlos Monzon on the topic Log Management for Kotlin Multi-Platform Projects. Carlos Monzon is a mobile tech lead at Preeze, specializing in cross-platform app development using Kotlin, Swift, and Kotlin Multi-Platform. With over 9 years in software development, he is deeply passionate about crafting mobile experiences for both Android and iOS platform. Let's all give him a warm welcome as he comes up for his talk.
Hello, everyone. Just wait for 1 second.
It takes a hot minute.
There you go. Okay, logs management in KMP, how to deal with logs in Kotlin multi-platform projects. So before I start, first I would like to ask who has used Kotlin or is using Kotlin right now in their projects? This one? 2, 3. Okay. Yeah, it's gonna be a difficult talk, but it's okay. It's okay. Cool. Well, if, just a little bit about me. If you want to connect with me, just scan the QR code. Okay, so probably for the majority of you who haven't heard about Kotlin multi-platform, well, Kotlin is a programming language, that you can use. Well, originally you can use it only to develop on Java applications or interrupt with Java, but now it's a multi-platform language, which can be used to share code between your Android application, your iOS application, even desktop or web on the client side. And if you got other common code as well, you can even share the same code with a server-side application. So, and so the topic for today is how do you deal with logs on a project like this, right? Like the standard way to do things, you probably wouldn't have a solution in each of the different platforms or how to deal with logs. So what if you are sharing code on the client side, on the common multi-platform cross server? What about those logs, right? That's what my talk is about. So first, just how the standard logging looks like, right? And what libraries we're going to use on each of those applications. On Android, you're usually going to use something like Android log, or there's a library called Timber as well, which is pretty much well known in the industry. On Apple, you got like different options as well, like NS log from Apple, or Logger, or community libraries like Exit Logger. Or if you're doing just Java applications, then you got other libraries that you can use. So if we take the example of the Android application, how does usually would look like to have your logs, right? You're gonna probably use something like Timber, which is pretty well known library, and then you're gonna probably have something that's gonna help you have logs on the console, right? So you're gonna have something in debug, and then you're gonna put that in your logcat, and while you're developing an application, you're gonna see those logs there. But obviously, when you go when you have a production application, you need those logs to be visible somewhere, because you need to know how your app is performing, what crashes you get. So you might have different services that you're gonna connect with, right? So you might have services like Datadog, Firebase, Sentry. So for those cases, you might have to add like a release tree or a release logs, right? So that's usually a standard way to have logs in an Android application. Obviously, the same applies for other platforms, just different libraries. But what about when you got share-code, right? So probably my first instinct would be like, okay, so if you got an Android app, if you're using Kotlin, and then your share-code on Kotlin multi-platform is also Kotlin, then I just move everything there and it should work, right? But unfortunately, probably some of you know that that's not gonna work, right? Because the thing with Kotlin multi-platform, if you have a common code, the libraries or the code that you're using in that shared code needs to also support multiple targets, right? So in this case, the Timber library is just a Java application. It doesn't target any other platform. Or probably the SDKs that you're using, like Datadog, Firebase, or Sentry, they also might not have SDKs for Kotlin multi-platform just yet, because Kotlin multi-platform is something new in the industry. So you wouldn't expect that a lot of log services will have SDKs out of the box. So that's probably going to be the first, kind of blocker. So just a statement there. If you're going to use something in KMP in the common code, the dependencies that you use there has to support multiple targets. But we got a library that you can use called Napier, which is pretty well maintained, and is a multi-platform library. It supports Android, iOS, well, all the Apple targets, iOS, Mac, macOS. It also supports JVM and JavaScript. So that's pretty cool. So if you use this library, you're gonna have your logs on Android, on iOS, and in the JVM, or also in JavaScript if you use that target. It has a simpler API to use. Just all the standard things like verbose, debug, info, warnings, or exceptions as well. So pretty easy to use. So now that we found a library that we can use on multi-platform, then going back to the Android example, right? Like instead of using Timber, which is not a multi-platform library, I'm gonna replace it with Napier, right? But because I'm using a multi-platform library, then that code can be also target other applications, like an iOS app or a desktop app. So that works all good. You're gonna be able to got all your logs on the console, or on the Logcat on Android Studio. So that works pretty good. But what about my log services integration, right? Like in my first slide, I go like services like Datadog or Sentry. Those SDKs doesn't have a multi-platform integration. So how do I integrate those logs there? Cool thing about the Napier is that you can create any custom log integration. So what you're gonna do is, in this case on Swift, you're gonna implement that NT-log and just create something for your particular implementation. In this case, I'm creating a Sentry NT-log there, and then just gonna get all the logs on iOS there, and you can integrate with it, whatever platform you need, right? One of the main advantages of using KMP is that interrupts pretty well with whatever platform you are targeting. So if you are targeting an iOS application, it's not a runtime that is running on iOS. It's actually sharing the same memory space. So you can just implement extend classes. So that's pretty handy. So when a logs come from Napier, then you can just map it to wherever your destination is, right? So all the info, you can map it to Sentry info, or whatever library you're using. So that's pretty cool. In exactly the same way, you can do it on Android or in Kotlin, right? So this can be used on Android or in any Java application. So once you have that, then each of your targets can implement that integration, and you can integrate with whatever SDK you have there. So you can integrate the standard Android Sentry SDK on your Android app, the same on the iOS app, or any other targets that you're using. So I created a quick sample. If you're going to take a look on that sample that shows you all the steps that I went through. And once you if you run that application, you're gonna be able to see all the logs. Same from the same application, the same common code. You're gonna be able to get the logs on your dashboard. So this is what you get on the iOS application. Each of the button is throwing different error messages, and then at the right you see the whatever you logs you get there. And then in the same code that I created a desktop app, the same UI, and the exceptions from the desktop app can also be showing there. So all the logs are exactly the same. And this is the Android app as well. Like all the sections, all the logs um, are being displayed on the same console. And yeah, that's it from me. Any questions? Sorry, what was that? Oh, yeah. There are a bunch of libraries, but Napier is pretty good because it has a lot of. Is that the API is easier to use? Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Oh, sorry. So it's just easier to use. The code is pretty simple, and it also has a lot of community support. So I always look for those two things. Um, that library got a lot of uh, people supporting it, and it's easy to use on your multi-platform. But then you definitely will find other libraries as well. So, but all follow the same concept. So it's not just Napier who can do this. You can find any library that might be able to achieve the same. But you might follow the same steps at the end. You integrate your SDKs on your Android or iOS application, then manage all your logs in the common code. Mhm. Mhm. Mm. That's a good question. KMP as a technology, it is already stable. What is still in beta is Compose multi-platform, which so probably for the audience who don't know the context, is Kotlin multi-platform is the technology that supports Compose multi-platform. Compose multi-platform, you can share UI. That part is still in beta, but KMP in general, that's stable already. Mhm. And for us at Preeze, we're using KMP to share business logic, but we're not sharing the UI. Mhm. Yes. Well, yeah, I think I have to check that, but if it supports macOS and all the Darwin targets, it should be able to support Kotlin native. Yeah. Thank you.